Hello, and welcome back to another episode of I Don't Know Who Needs to Hear This. I'm Lauren, and I'm here with my co host, Gabrielle. And today we are going to talk a little bit about school transitions or just transitions in general for highly sensitive, neurodivergent kids, or honestly, any child. So I think that like the timing of this is good. I recently shared a post that sort of inspired me to talk to Gabrielle about this and want to dive more into it here because of a lot of the feedback that I got from that post. So I just think it's something that we definitely need to talk about. A lot of parents were relating to it. A lot of parents were telling me I was an idiot. So we can just sort of dive into that here. And I think it will be like a good thing to kind of discuss because I know a lot of people right now are either starting kindergarten or they have a toddler who is sort of aging out of early intervention and they're going to start early childhood special education. This is also applicable to a lot of parents reach out to me who were having to start daycare or they were even having like someone come in like a couple of days a week to be with their kids. So just like really any transition like that. I had some that were talking about maybe they need like a medical procedure and wanting like to transition, like working on that transition too. So just like transition in generals and our more sensitive or neurodivergent children and how that sort of impacts them and the overall emphasis being like you are not crazy. So
Yeah.
let's
Yeah,
let's kind of dive into that.
that's what I was going to say before we dive into it, or before you start diving into it is, I know Lauren, I brought this up to you before, but the mental load that's on us as moms who are parents in general that have kids that are maybe more sensitive or might struggle with some of these transitions more than others, like the mental load that comes along with that is, I think, a very isolating experience. So we can talk about that more throughout this episode, but I want to like speak to that and normalize that as well of like it feels harder because it is harder to be having this struggle with transitions or different experiences with your child that another mom with a different child with a different temperament or a different sort of experience. You're not better or worse and your child is not better or worse for the experiences that you're having that are different from another child's, but it does feel harder because it is harder. So we can speak to that a little bit more too as we chat here.
Yeah. And I think like I don't want to be cryptic. Like this is like a huge like this topic we could talk about this for hours honestly or in
Yeah.
like a 15-part series. Like this is like
Yeah.
a really big thing that we're going to try to cram into one episode here. So for like some people know my story. I've shared it on Substack. Essentially, like the breakdown of what happened for us was that when my son turned 3, we actually went through this twice because we were moving at the time. So when you turn 3, you age out of early intervention services, and we had been using early intervention services since he was about 1. And so then you go into early childhood special education, and those services are very different. They're done through the school district. They are more like compliance, academic, and those kinds of things. And so it is like a really harsh transition for a lot of parents and a lot of children. Early intervention is typically in the home, very child-led, really inclusive of the parent. And so that transition can be tough from like that sort of environment to one where like parents are not allowed inside of the building sometimes and those kinds of things. And we had a really traumatic experience with that. And where we used to live, I had to advocate really aggressively to be able to join him in sort of his assessment for that. And ultimately I was allowed to, and he qualified for services there. And then we moved like 3 weeks later and they were like, oh, we can't use that assessment. We have to do it again. And I had a lot of hope at that time because they were like, come on in, like you come with us. And I was meeting with PT, OT, the educator, other people I am not sure like who they were. But I thought, wow, like they're really inclusive. And then this was like 3 1-hour sort of sessions. And then they were like, now we want him for a whole day and you're not allowed to come in the building. And that was not going to work for him. And so I did some advocating and really was treated sort of terribly.
Mm-hmm.
by the people that were involved in this, and we had a conversation related to, and I'm getting like way too in the weeds of this because this could take the whole time for me to the whole episode could just be me telling this story. But essentially, he had some like safety concerns there, and I had some like well-being and mental health concerns for him there. And so I consented to a very specific set of circumstances in which he could go in without me. And when the door closed, that is not what happened. In fact, they sort of did 100% the opposite in every area that they could have. And it was really traumatic for him. And something to be named right out the gate is that you're not crazy in recognizing that your more sensitive child takes a longer time to recover from something, right? Like when my son was very young, he got his finger pinched in the seatbelt of the car seat, and we couldn't go in the car seat for like 6 weeks. Like it was really traumatic for him, and that is something that we see in highly sensitive or neurodivergent children who are also highly sensitive. Like it is more impactful. It impacts them more. And so I just want to kind of get into some of that and offer parents some validation before sort of embarking on this experience.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And my son is younger, so we are not in the school age yet, but one of my biggest fears, or not fears might be an extreme word, but I really struggle in general with the idea of dropping your kid off on the first day and then leaving immediately. And like, regardless of what their temperament is or neurodivergent or anything like that, like that whole concept, the fact that that's the norm is a really tough point for me, where we are expected as moms to kind of just be like, okay, bye, see ya, like see you at the end of the day, goodbye, and like there's no immersion transition component. And to your point, I think for babies that have some more needs, or more highly sensitive, that sort of expectation or norm, that's even potentially more damaging than it would be for sort of the typical child. So I think, yeah, I would love to hear more about your thoughts and what you would suggest to parents, or sort of how you would navigate this with them.
Yeah. So I think, I have three children, right? So one of them is 19 in 3 days. The other is 15, and
Hmm.
now I have one that will be 5 in just a few weeks. And so we have sort of seen this play out over and over, and like it is a systemic like pattern, like it is a problem.
Yeah.
And like I don't want educators, therapists. Like I am not anti-educator. I'm not anti-therapist. I am aware that there are staffing shortages. I'm aware that there are budget problems. I'm aware that there are significant principal problems. Like if you have a
Hmm.
principal at your school that won't let you speak up to advocate for children,
Yeah.
we've run into that. I can see with my eyes that you are agreeing with me and you can't speak up because your principal is sitting at the table. So there are like politics within the school system, and people, I believe, are doing the best that they can do. And there is a severe lack of education in trauma, neurodivergence, attachment, all of these things that are really important. And this way that we do this is cultural. Like in other countries, it's not done this way. Parents get time
Hmm.
off. Some of them get weeks off to transition their children into kindergarten. A lot of daycare centers have like a profound transition period where parents go the whole day and then 3/4 of the day, and they like transition out of
Yeah.
that. And there's a reason for that. And so this feeling that you're feeling is valid and like totally a thing. And I also recognize that when you're showing up in spaces online, like Facebook, that there are people who don't share that opinion or concern. There are a lot of
Yeah.
people, especially for early childhood special education. I was getting into groups to try to see like, are other people like not losing their minds? And there are a lot of people who are like viewing that as like free childcare. I get my days back. Like I can't wait to send them. And like I can't relate to that.
Yeah.
and that's okay. Like, so like it's just like sort of this whole cluster of like feeling and like not being able to label what you're feeling, and society is telling you that what you're feeling is wrong. And so just some things, like I really want to like offer that I have the perspective of the educator as well. In like I am
Yeah.
not a teacher, but I was a nurse on the floor, and so I think that what happened often, not sometimes, like probably every shift in some way or another, was that a patient who advocated for themselves, or a patient who had a family member who was really diligent about advocating for their family member, would then be deemed as problematic
Yeah.
or too much or coddling or anxious or and I know that because I would come on for my shift, or I would receive a patient. I was in critical care or ICU, and so I'm receiving patients who are like decompensating. And in report, the nurse who's handing that patient off to me would describe them that way. They're really demanding. And then I get the patient, and demanding was that the patient wanted to know the name of every medication and why they were taking them before they put them in their mouth. Like, that's not demanding. That is your right as a
Hmm.
patient
Yeah.
every single time. And does it take time away from the nurse? Yes. um, but almost always in report from the
Yeah.
offgoing nurse, there's a little bit of smack talk, which is what it
Yeah.
is. Like
Yeah.
you have this opinion, like you are a little bit jaded, and there are
Hmm.
reasons why you're jaded, right? Like you're short
Yeah.
staffed, you have a lot of patients, and this is like you're trying to keep people alive, and it is like
Yeah.
and you're constantly doing this like triage, and in the triage of things telling you what your metoprolol for the third, like, well, you're not taking metoprolol 3 times a day, but like, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
like in the triage of like this guy over here is circling the drain. I get it, right? But it's not
Right.
appropriate, and there is a lot of evidence that having the family in the room or having a patient feel heard impacts their outcomes positively.
Hmm.
And all of that feels very similar to me in the situation that we went through and the situation that parents tell me that they went through. They immediately recognize the eye rolls. They immediately recognize that, like, before this IEP meeting, a discussion was had about me
Yeah.
and it was not positive. And now you can just see it. You can see the
Yeah.
glances. When you say something that you know is going to be a trigger point, you can see the professionals glance across the table, roll their eyes. A lot of parents are experiencing that. And when, in the medical world, we know that the outcomes are better when family is present, and we should do everything in our power to make that happen.
Yeah.
And we know that family can be problematic, right? Like,
Hmm.
I'm not saying that that is not the case. And like all these angry nurses will come at me and say, like, they get in the way of like they can actually harm the patient. True. That is true. Like, I've seen it happen. I've sat at the nurse's station and watched an incredible doctor go into a room and spend 40 minutes with a patient and answer, and it's my patient, so I'm listening because I want the plan of
Hmm.
care. I hear everything they're going over, the medication changes, the imaging, the labs, and then I go into the room 40 minutes later with the new meds, and that patient tells me, no doctor's seen me today, this place is trash. And the family
Mm.
member says, we really need imaging done, when I know that that doctor spent a lot of time, sat down next to the bed, like I watched it happen. So
Yeah.
like I know that these things happen,
Yeah.
and like I know that that jades people. And so I think that we just need to be more I don't know what the answer is, but I know
Hmm.
that these things are also happening to educators, right?
Yeah.
I understand that likely I don't have an example in the way that I have an example in nursing, but I know that it is likely true that sometimes parents are getting in the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but we know that for therapy specifically, which is what most parents reach out to me for when we're talking about early childhood special education, it's better if the parents are in the room. Like the child is more regulated, they can participate more in therapy. The parent is learning how to do the therapy
Yeah.
so they can go home, and therapy is then part of their lifestyle instead of just happening in a 45-minute window where they're actually in therapy. So I think that one of the things that is really important is that in nursing, before I would ever even consider removing a family member out of the room, I am going to set boundaries and I'm going to educate, right? Like
Hmm.
I'm going to say like, this is my goal. This is what we need to focus on. This is why this is more important than something. Some families in a really vulnerable, dire situation, they want to control something. So they want to
Yeah.
focus on like changing a dressing on a wound when the patient was just intubated, and like, like they want to
Yeah.
have control. They want to feel something, and that is absolutely valid. Um, it is not appropriate though to let a family member in the room like impede patient care, and I think the same is true for therapy, right? One of the things that happens frequently when you're like getting a new patient and families in the room is you're trying to get a patient history and you are trying to ask the patient questions and the family answers for them,
Yeah.
and almost always the patient answer would have been different if the family member would have let the patient speak.
Hmm.
So like that is a great example of like this history is really important and I have to get the information from the patient.
Hmm.
And so it moving forward, if you continue to answer for them, I'm going to have you step out. Like that is a
Hmm.
really great boundary, a piece of education. And we, at this point, through all of our children, have been in many situations where we're working with therapists or school or whatever, and never once have we received any kind of direction like that in
Hmm.
an attempt to keep us in the room. It has always
Yeah. Yeah.
been, you're anxious, we know best.
Yeah.
We support thousands of students. I have 25 years of experience, those kinds of things. And I'll like link my Substack and like our specific story in the show notes if you want to go read it. But it was a lot, just like a perfect storm of like me being ignored, my child's needs not being taken seriously. And it really impacted him in like really incredibly significant ways. Like we had to have play
Yeah.
therapy, and he lost his special interests and a lot of those things. And so I think it's really important for parents because I felt crazy. I'm in a
Yeah.
room full of professionals. There were 5 or 6 of them, and you typically are in a room with multiple people. Those people have talked about you beforehand. They think that you're anxious. And sort of this Western society view of children is what's at play there, like behaviorism,
Yeah.
compliance, and a lot of those things. It's really hard to advocate when you don't feel like you have someone in your corner. If I were to have been able to go to a coffee shop before I went to this horrific meeting, like let's say you and I went to the coffee shop and I told you all of my concerns and you were like, you're right, all of it.
Hmm.
Like you are right about every single thing. You should absolutely be advocating for a safety that is not too much. I would have walked into that meeting in a way different headspace than I did having not had that, because they're very convincing, right? Like they will convince you that you are
Hmm.
crazy or gaslight you into thinking like I'm the reason that my child isn't getting services,
Right.
or that I'm holding him back in some way. And I do understand that sometimes that can be the case. Like perhaps there is anxiety or something
Hmm.
like that going on. Um, but if that were the case, and you were not getting feedback or boundaries or education from those instructor, like the educators or the therapists, like that would be something to advocate for. Is there a reason that you don't want me in the room? Have I done something to
Right.
get in the way of what you're trying to accomplish? And it's very easy to do. I've had to educate my husband in some of these
Hmm.
meetings. One of them actually was our youngest autism assessment. One of the things that they want to assess for is like following a point. Like, will they look where you're pointing?
Hmm.
And so they kept doing it, and my husband kept saying, "Hey, over here," and I'm like
Mm.
you've
Yeah.
undone what they're trying to do here.
Right.
Like
Right. Right.
they're
Right.
trying to
Right.
assess something, And like he's a physician. Like it's really easy to not recognize what they're trying to assess or not understand that and like get in the way and like
Totally.
compromise. You've compromised it, right? Like you
Right.
have so I think that one of the things that is just really important for parents is that you get to consent to what happens to your child. And if
Hmm.
they do more than what you have consented to, you are not crazy
Right.
or they don't use the word crazy. Like I can't even think of like the words that like it's just
Well,
like this you go.
yeah. Just I think what you're trying to say, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is like just because you consent to something doesn't mean then you have to sit back and be a fly on the wall for the rest of
Yeah.
the appointment. Like you're still allowed to then be part of the conversation, step in when needed. I think the other thing too, and I'm speaking from a parent perspective on this and my personal experience, is it's helpful sometimes to know what my role is supposed to be in some of these appointments or some of these sessions. Like my son's been in physical therapy, we've been in myofunctional therapy, and like it's always helpful for me, even if it's not explicitly said, if it's at least like sort of communicated or implied in a way that is understandable to me, like what my role is there. Like especially like physical therapy, like when he was really young, like the therapist would get on the floor with him and play with him. And I remember there was a moment where I was like, am I supposed to get down there with them too? Like, am I supposed to be playing with them on the floor? Or is this just like the two of them? Like, when do I come in? Like, it's sometimes confusing. And again, this is not on necessarily the fault of the therapist or the professionals because sometimes it's just lost in translation. But I think something that we can do as parents or as, advocates for our children is even ask in the beginning of a session, of an appointment, whatever it may be, of a therapy, session, what is my role here, or like let me know what you want me to do to participate in this, and just to say like I'm here, because I also don't want a therapist or a professional to think that I'm like not interested or like not involved
Yeah.
in what they're doing with my child. So there's this very like weird role that we serve where I'm literally, my son goes to myofunctional therapy now, and I literally like sit on a chair like in the corner of the room, like sort of involved, like sort of watching, but like not part of it directly. And then sometimes I will get involved in certain activities, and I've gotten used to it, and I really, really love his myofunctional therapist. But it's a weird role to be in,
Yeah.
as a parent. So I think just even having that conversation from the beginning of like, what do you see my role being here in this relationship, in this setting? And I want to be involved in a way that's appropriate and helpful for my child. So I just want you to know I'm here, I'm watching, I'm present. Like, let me know if you would like me to be involved in this therapy or this, activity in any sort of way.
Yeah. And I think too, like you knowing your child can
Yeah,
help in sort of that
right.
instance.
That happened recently. It just made me think of it. That happened recently with his myofunctional therapy. There was something he was trying to say. My son's 2.5, so he talks, but there's still certain things where like it's toddler language. Like I understand him, but like someone else might not. So just like certain things like that, where I could tell he was trying to communicate something and trying to like say something, but it was completely lost in translation to the therapist. Not her fault at all. She just couldn't understand how he talks right now. But I knew immediately like what he was trying to say and what
Yeah.
he was trying to communicate. So like chiming in at that point and being like, oh, he's saying he wants the blue cup, or like he's saying he wants to blow bubbles now, or something like that. And she just like what like she couldn't understand him, but
Yeah.
I could. And like getting to a point where that feels comfortable and appropriate, because there was definitely a moment where I was like, should I just sit back and be silent and like let him try to like work it out, or let them try to work it out together? And I was like, no, like this is me sort of like supporting my child through this, of being able to say, oh, this is what he's trying to say, and I don't want him to get frustrated because she's not understanding, because then it would just kind of derail what the point of the therapy was.
Yeah. I think that is, I'm so glad you said that because like that is a lot of things. That is like a very specific example that comes up a lot in my DMs and was true for us, especially for those working in speech therapy.
Yeah.
Because our son like made up signs and had approximations that didn't really, he was making
Yeah.
them up. So like I knew them and the impact that had on therapy, like imagine trying to communicate something and getting more and more frustrated and
Right.
dysregulated, and now you're like losing therapy time, you're
Right.
losing regulated engagement, when I could quickly just be like, this is what's happening, and then we're
Yeah.
staying regulated. And so like that is like a perfect example of how like keeping someone in the room. And I recognize like when you're in like early childhood special education, it's very different. You can't like go to school with them all day.
Yeah.
But like when you do have like a more sensitive child, like like that first like meeting, that first like experience with that can really set the tone. And it really did for like our older children who have always struggled in school. Like if you can save that, like you don't want him to have a negative association with therapy because the therapist
Right.
couldn't was ignoring, and they weren't ignoring, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
to your child it feels like I want the blue cup and I'm saying that over and over and over again, and they're just like
It's a
ignoring
misattunement.
me.
There's a
Yeah.
misattunement, and that's distressing to a child. And we know we talked about that before on other
Yeah.
episodes, but whether it's intentional or not, a misattunement is stressful and dysregulating for a child. And we're not going to get it perfectly. We talked about this, but we're not going to get it perfectly 100% of the time. But if we can help support that along, and I was attuned to him because I know what he's trying to communicate, and it helps keep him regulated. So that's what it is. It's a misattunement, an accidental one and an unintentional one, but still a misattunement.
Yeah. And so the opposite side, so you and I think similarly. So you and I are like, yeah, 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 like this is how this should be, but not everybody does. And the opposition to like what we're saying right now is your kids got to learn. Like
Yeah.
they've got to learn to deal with misattunements and all of these things. They really don't at
Hmm.
age 2. Like they really don't during a time of huge transition. Like that's not the time. Like you can
Yeah.
like let's do learning to work through our feelings not during a time when we're surrounded by strangers or people we've only
Right.
met one or two times, not during a time when we're in a new building, not during like they really don't need
Yeah.
to
Right.
learn how to conquer right now. Like right
Right.
now is not the time for that. So I think that like parents just like need to hear that like
Yeah.
you are okay to advocate for your child, you're okay to stand your ground even when people are like rolling their eyes. There is a lot of evidence that supports
Hmm.
that learning and being able to engage in activities like happens when you're regulated. Like you're not
Hmm.
teaching someone, like even like a teenager, like are you going to teach someone the quadratic formula when they're
Hmm.
sobbing? You're not like teaching someone something profound or navigating a huge transition while also being dysregulated. Like we don't have to do that for our
Yeah.
children. And I think a lot of what was really hard for me in this one situation, but also for our other children, is they had to like earn their accommodations. And that is
Yeah.
so
Right.
unfair. You don't first have to traumatize children to then accommodate them. The accommodations can come first to keep them
Right.
regulated. And now we're going to get into like the staffing. There's no staffing to accommodate. Like our kids have legal rights
Yeah.
to some of these things, and so it can really be a rabbit hole that you go down to try to figure out like what your child has rights to. And I just want to make it so crystal clear to parents that it is okay to go in and advocate, and that resistance that you're meeting is our society's. It isn't like that in other places.
Yeah.
We hate children here. We just like don't view them as people with feelings that matter, and everybody should just learn or adjust or whatever that mindset is. We don't have to do that. We
No.
can support them through a transition. And I know that they're in both situations regarding the specific thing that happened with my youngest. I was told, no, you cannot be in the room. Now, the first time I pushed and pushed and pushed, and they eventually let me. And the second time they told me no. And that was when we agreed to like this very specific set of circumstances. And then after they failed to do it, they had me come back and be in the room. So push back on
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
Just let this whole episode be your permission to push back on that and recognize, let this be your meeting in a coffee shop with your bestie who's telling you You're right. You do know your child best, and it is okay to advocate for them. And maybe you can speak more to this sort of phenomenon because I don't really have the language for it. And it is currently happening to me. I feel like I cannot explain myself. I can't,
Mm-hmm.
the more I explain myself, the crazier people are presuming me to be. I've had a lot of parents message me and be like, I'm afraid to speak up at school because I don't want them to think it's like a Munchausen situation. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want
Hmm.
them to think that, like, I don't want my kid to suffer because I'm the squeaky wheel. Like,
Yeah.
there is this, like, a lot of us are being quiet and people pleasing and sort of being compliant in spaces where we should not be. There's
Yeah.
harm. What happened to my son was harm.
Yeah.
This was regression in language, and he wouldn't eat, and he was holding his bowel movements and was grinding his teeth and wouldn't sleep. Like, every domain in which he was thriving for months was impacted by this experience. Like, that's trauma. And people are like, oh,
Yeah.
you're really dramatic and kids need to learn. That's not what this was.
No.
And I wasn't the parent who was interrupting therapies. I understood that, and I think a lot of parents have children who are this way. Like, their kid is fine, and then if they see you or hear you,
Hmm.
then they kind of get upset and
Yeah.
like they
Yeah.
realize like. So I actually did a lot of like sort of educating with the staff who was assessing him, like, you can't ask me questions right now, like, you can't
Hmm.
look to me
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
if I answer you, he's going to hear me and it's going to pull him out of this therapeutic
Yeah. Yeah.
experience that we're having.
Right.
So I was in the back. I was like behind a corner. A lot of times they have like those globes in the ceiling
Yeah.
so you can see around a corner. I could watch him that way. So I feel for parents who, and a lot of that came from my nursing experience. Like, I
Hmm.
knew that when they were asking him a question, they needed it from him. They were assessing
Yeah.
him, not me. And
Right.
that came from nursing, and a lot of other parents don't have that. And I still had the experience I had.
Yeah.
So I don't know what sort of that phenomenon is that we're all afraid
Yeah.
to speak up, or it's really like even in comments, like I can't even get into it because I feel like if I the more I justify the way that
Yeah.
I feel about it, the worse my people will perceive me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. And that I don't think it's necessarily one phenomenon or one description, but I think there's a component of imposter syndrome, but just as like a
Yeah.
mom or like a person who knows my child best, like I felt that way. Maybe it's a little bit of like white coat syndrome too, of like,
Mhm.
you're in a room. Is that the right term for that?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, like you're in a room with a professional who like has a degree in this, and then suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, do I actually know my child's best? Like, do I actually know what's right for them or what's best for them? Or like, and then there's also kind of a phenomenon of like not trusting your own senses or your own observations of things. And this is something that I dealt with. I mean, this is a bit of a tangent, but um, I've been very open about how like I live with OCD. I have OCD and anxiety, and a lot of my obsessions and compulsions revolve around like, or they have in the past, like, can I trust myself? Can I trust my senses? Can I trust what I'm seeing? Can I trust what I'm experiencing? Like, one of my biggest compulsions and obsessions for a long time was like, if I was driving on the road and I hit a bump, like I would think I ran over a person. And I like couldn't trust that, like I couldn't trust my own senses that like I
Yeah.
hadn't actually ran over a person. Like, I was doubting my sight, my hearing, my feeling. Like, I couldn't trust myself. And I think that has come up a lot in motherhood too. And that's kind of where this conversation took me in my own mind, was we doubt ourselves as like, am I actually seeing my child? For me, am I actually seeing my child's mouth breathe all night, or am I like kind of making that up or not really seeing it that way? Or like, is he actually like having reflux 30 times a day, or is that being dramatic? Like, and then I would be in a room with a doctor, a professional, who'd be like, oh, like that's normal, or like that's not that bad, or like they don't, he's not actually having this problem. And there'd be that white coat syndrome, that imposter syndrome, and I'd be like, oh yeah, maybe it actually isn't that bad. Maybe this is on me. Maybe this is me like being dramatic about it, or not being able to trust my own memory or my own interpretation of things, my own experiences. And I think that's all kind of comes into this here. There's the other component of this is just like this fear of being seen as, I mean, you mentioned it, too anxious, too overbearing, too sort of like involved, and getting that pushback that we are somehow damaging our children or harming them more or making them more susceptible to trouble down the road. And I think what I always come back to, I forget who originally kind of said this, but the essence of it was that the world is going to give our children enough stressors by default. Like there's going to be enough going on in their worlds, in their lives throughout the course of being alive that, gives them obstacles, gives them stress. We don't have to add to that on purpose. We don't have to give them stressful experiences. Like the
Yeah.
world is going to do that on its own. And we don't have to make it worse. So we don't have to add to that. We don't have to give them adversity. We don't have to give them obstacles. We don't have to make a stressful situation like being in therapy, for example. Even the best therapist in the world, the best environment in the world, it's a stressful experience for a child. It's a new thing. It's a new environment. It is that way as it is. We don't have to add to it. So like, for example, my example of my son being in myofunctional therapy, he does great in it. He loves the therapist. She's great, but it is a stressful experience. It's a lot on his brain. It's a lot on his mind, his body, his nervous system. So for me to not interject and sort of like help him communicate in that moment is adding an extra stress to that experience that is not necessary. Like it's not going to help him progress better in this particular area for me not to sort of help him along in a way that is appropriate, and add extra stress to something that's already a little bit taxing on his nervous system. So all that to say, we don't have to add stress to our children's lives when we can avoid it. The world is going to do enough of that on its own, and we
Yeah.
can be that safe haven support system for them that's always kind of in their corner, advocating for them, helping them navigate these stressful experiences and co-regulating to the best of our abilities.
Yeah, I think you brought up like several really good things there. One is that if this is a stressful experience way better than someone else does.
Yeah.
And what happens a lot of times is like this, especially in neurodivergent children, is this masking. And
Mm-hmm.
so you go into a situation where a therapist is like, they're doing great, but you go home and now
Yeah.
they don't have access to spoken language. They like, I am messaging a lot of parents who are reporting like there's a lot of fallout afterwards, and
Yeah.
we know that like after school restraint collapse is real and like those sorts of things, and some of that like is unavoidable. But I think that a lot of parents are sort of it's sort of like this gaslighting that occurs, like it's just a
Yeah.
transition, they gotta work through it. And to what you were saying, like we don't need to make this the most stressful thing ever. Like make this easier. It's okay to do that, and there's resistance to that. I like that you talked about like sort of gaslighting yourself. I do that like about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like is what I am like experiencing, like is this, and it especially happens with me related to like neurodivergence, and like
Yeah. Yeah.
is this a neurodivergent thing, or is what I'm feeling valid? Like,
Yeah.
am I allowed to be upset about this, or is this like a sensory meltdown, or like, can I be
Right.
upset at my husband about that? Like, I like really like getting like some diagnoses sort of impacted me in a negative way, because now I like don't allow myself to feel things, right? Like I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
allow, like I'm like, oh, this is like an autism thing, and really I probably am very valid in being concerned or upset or feeling however I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens in these meetings. It's happened to me. It is like all over in my DMs. When I shared this post this week, someone commented that was like, no teacher is doing this. I think I
Mm-hmm.
looked at your profile. It says you're neurodivergent. I think I understand how you read it this way, but that's not what happened, and you need therapy, was this
Mm.
comment. And that bothered me, and I wasn't
That's
sleeping
a
because I'm like, what are you talking about? Like my child, like, did you read that? Like my child had like months of like negative
yeah.
outcome as a result of this, and you're telling me that I like made it up. Like, so
Yeah.
that's what's happening. Like that
Yeah.
is, and I hope this person leaves it. They're getting like slammed in my comment section, and I took screenshots because I'm like, oh, this person's gonna bail out.
Mm-hmm.
But like, that is what happens. Like, that is a
Yeah.
perfect example of what happens to a parent in these meetings. They're like, sort of like, oh, maybe like you have anxiety, you're the problem, and you need
Yep.
therapy. This person told me I needed to work on my capacity. But
Mm.
like, we aren't like, and even the educators or the therapists, like, we did like social stories to prepare for this. We went to the building like on weekends, we played on the playground, we like role played at home. Like, we supported him in so many ways. Like, I absolutely, and like, now I'm feeling like, oh, here I am justifying myself again, people are going to think I'm nuts. But like, we absolutely did the things, right? Like,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
researched how to do this. There are a lot of like really great creators that are like, here's how to help your
yeah,
child transition into preschool or daycare or whatever. There's a lot of great guides out there with like great advice. Like, I really did my research, and I worked with the early intervention therapist. Like, they worked with him to help support
yeah,
him through this. Like, and worked with me. Like, and then to have someone just be like, oh, like, this is a you problem. You need to be in
yeah,
therapy. It's probably because you're autistic that you think this way,
yeah,
and no teacher's doing this. You made this up. When this was a direct report from the teacher, like, I'm only telling you what she told me.
yeah,
Um, like, that is what's happening to parents.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's really
yeah,
hard because we're already gaslighting ourselves. Like, did I run over
yeah.
somebody? It's very interesting you
Right.
say that, because I have done that. I've circled the block to be like, oh my God, like,
Yeah.
and it really
Right.
was a speed bump. Like, ugh.
Right.
um,
Just a side note on that for anyone listening who is like, oh my gosh, that's me too. This is a little bit of a tangent, but I have had OCD pretty much my entire life, and I did years and years of exposure and response prevention therapy, and and it was helpful in the moment. But what one thing that I think was life changing ultimately for my OCD was something called inference based cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's ICBT. This is different than CBTI, which is for insomnia. So sometimes they get mixed up.
yeah,
ICBT is specifically for OCD and anxiety and things like that. It's a newer sort of therapy for OCD, but what it really focuses on and why it's relevant to this conversation is getting in touch with your senses and being able to kind of like trust your view of the world again, because what OCD does and what anxiety does, whether it's clinical or diagnosed or not, is make you doubt yourself and doubt your senses and doubt what you know to be true and everything that we're talking about here. So, not saying everyone who feels this way can be diagnosed with OCD or anxiety, but if you are even starting to feel this way, that type of therapy where it really kind of gets in touch with your true core self, what you really know to be true, what your real fears are. So, for example, like for me, just to go to the driving over a bump example, my fear wasn't so much like, did I hit a person? Of course, that was like a worry. Like, obviously, I didn't want to hit someone, but what OCD really was concerned about was this other component of what it said about me. So, for example, the example of did I hit someone or did I just hit like a speed bump? My fear was really not did I hit a person, but if I did hit a person, what does that mean about me? So it was kind of this extra like inference of that action. And so getting to the bottom of like what the fear really was with my therapist was so helpful. So for example, like if I hit a person, that would mean I was irresponsible. Would mean I wasn't paying attention. That would mean I was dangerous. I was unsafe. Irresponsible was a big one for me. That one came up a lot. So a lot of my fears were kind of around this inference based sort of component of like, if XYZ happens, what does that say about me? So, for example, if I didn't check the locks at night and someone broke into my house, was I really worried about an intruder, or was I worried that that means that I was irresponsible and I put my family at risk and I didn't do the safest behavior and those types of things. So kind of getting to like those core fears was really helpful for me. So anyway, all that to say, going back to this conversation, not being able to trust your senses can be really, really scary and invalidating, and to have someone else in your ear, like kind of reinforcing that and kind of telling you like, yeah, you're overreacting, you're being crazy, is a really good ammunition for a maladaptive thought pattern that you're already having and can be detrimental and make it even worse. So I think that those types of conversations around like being able to advocate for yourself, being able to trust yourself, being able to trust your instincts. Like that's why I talk about this so much on social media, is because I think the crux of a lot of this is we need to get to a point where we can really trust ourselves so that we can be the best advocates possible for the vulnerable people in our lives, such as our children, and also for ourselves.
I think you also highlighted a really important point, like when you ended that there, because this idea that we can't trust our instincts starts like the moment, and we talked about this in other episodes, like the moment that your baby comes out, and it just keeps going. Like it's just like relentless. And you and
Mm-hmm.
I have talked about like even in like a medical setting, and like sort of like what is the like what are the tangible things that we can do. And I've talked about like I help parents like sort of navigate some of these appointments. And like if you know like you're a people pleaser and you get like that white
Yeah.
coat syndrome and you can't stand up in the moment, take the appointment, go to the appointment, and then put it in like a portal message. Like
Yeah.
there has to be, unfortunately, when you're dealing with the school, if I could go back, I would put a lot more in writing.
Hmm.
And I have a lot of that in writing, which is sort of like to my detriment now because I still go back and read that
Yeah.
like where did I miss this? Like how did I let this happen? And I was really like kind of like shocked when this happened because I felt like we had this really good understanding, and then she like opened that vestibule door 6 inches, took my kid from me, and then like all of this sort of transpired. And I'm like, how? And you're sort of like you feel helpless, right? Like you can't get
Yeah.
into these schools. They're like you buzz a door, they unlock you in. Like you can't, like you've
Yep.
just,
Yep.
I wasn't
Yep.
prepared for it. And if I could go back, like and in my Substack, I wrote it like at the time, so it's
Hmm.
emotional. It maybe should be one that I take down and rewrite. But like if I could go back, like knowing I'm a people pleaser, knowing all these things about myself, like I would take my husband with
Hmm.
me. I would not have done that by myself, or a friend. I think I would
Yeah.
have met with someone beforehand who I knew like really understood my values and understood my kids and maybe had a conversation just to sort of like help me feel validated. And like this is just giving some suggestions to parents
Yeah.
who are sort of walking into this. And like you and I have talked about this, like as it relates to like stuff that you have encountered like medically and like asking for second opinions. And
Yeah.
like it can just be really like the power dynamic, like you said, like they are a professional, they're telling you they've done this for 25 years, and you start to question like, do
Yeah.
I know more about my child than someone who has supported thousands of children
Right.
over many, many years? The answer is yes, you
Yeah.
do. There are things you don't know. Absolutely. Educators want to come and be like, no parent's going to tell me what I'm going to do with a kid. You both need to be like working as a team, but you need to be taken seriously. And if you feel like you're not, like that is a red flag. If you feel like they're dismissing you or rolling their eyes at you, um, that's not in your head. And like some
Yeah.
of the stuff you were talking about, like trusting your instincts and like that being really hard when, because you're not in these rooms alone. There's
No.
like 5 people. And
Yeah.
sometimes you can see, in our situation, I could see like with our middle son, like when we used to go to IEP meetings, I can see the psychiatrist, the school psychiatrist, maybe psychologist,
Hmm.
sitting in the corner, like nodding when I'm talking,
Mm.
but you're not saying like say
Yeah.
something. And like
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
sort of a situation where I discovered like, oh, they can't, like they are
Yeah.
fearful for their jobs, and there's a lot more at play behind the scenes there. So I'm not really sure like how to wrap this up, but like just know as you are like transitioning into this that it is completely reasonable to request a slower transition time. It's completely reasonable to want to see the classroom with no children in it. Maybe start with a quarter of a day and then go to a half day. So, like, there are a dozen different ways to try to do things differently. And this excuse about this is our policy, or,
Yeah.
and there are going to be a lot of people that disagree, but like if you're not on an IEP already, then you don't really get accommodations. And what about kids who aren't neurodivergent and they're sensitive? Like it just really is problematic, and it's okay to feel that and experience that and question it and advocate.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. I have no notes. I couldn't have said it any better myself.
We'll wrap this up because really, like I said, we could turn this into like a million mini conversations. But we definitely want to hear from you if you are navigating some of these experiences or you have had something similar. What worked for you? What didn't? Like, what would you have done differently? I want to know because we are obviously at the beginning of our journey, and Gabrielle wants to know because it's gonna happen for her. We all want to know.
It
So
is. Yes.
let us know in the comments. You can message us. And if this is something that we should continue to talk more about, we would definitely be happy to do so.
Yep. And
Uh,
we're glad you're here, and we'll talk to you next time.
all right. We'll see you guys later. Bye bye.